I recently read a book about a young family living in Cambodia, a mother, a father, and their little baby. The mother's name is Song Lee, and it's written from her perspective, and she's so upset because her little boy is sick. He's very, very sick, and she continues to bring him to the doctors, and he gets better for a little bit, and then he gets sick again. And then she'll bring him to another healer, and then he gets sick again. And this is really what her life consists of. That and the fact that they live in a garbage heap. Their home is literally located on top of garbage. Garbage all around them. They live in a little village of people who live in this garbage heap. And it's a fictional book, but it's based on true facts of people living in Cambodia who do live in these garbage heaps. And their job and how they provide for themselves is to go out into the garbage heap and to collect recyclables and other things that they might be able to sell. And one day while they're out there, they find a picture book. And they're so excited about this, and they bring it home to their little boy, and he's just looking through the pictures because none of them know how to read. Not only do they not know how to read, but they don't know anybody else who knows how to read. In the 1970s in Cambodia, there was a terrible government that took over and burned almost all the books and executed those who were educated and who were teachers and who knew how to read. And so for a long time period in Cambodia, there were many, many people who did not know how to read. And this is the case of this young family. And so Song Lee brings this little book to her boy. And then one day, the rent collector comes to their home, and she lifts up the tarp that's the front of their home. And as she's asking, in her grumpy voice and cranky attitude, she's an older woman, she's asking to collect the money, probably demanding it. She looks over and sees the little baby looking at the book. And there's something in her eyes that Song Lee sees, and she intuitively knows that this rent collector is a person who knows how to read. And even though she's a really disagreeable person, Song Lee musters up the courage to ask the rent collector to teach her how to read. She somehow feels like it will help her family. She says, "I hope reading will give my son something to look forward to, a reason to fight. I want to believe that reading will fill him with courage." I love that even though she doesn't know how to read and has never read or known anybody who knows how to read, she sees that it will make a difference in her family, or she hopes for that. What she wants for her family is a Liber Culture. I'm going to show you this picture of what the Liber Culture consists of, and it's called the Liber Cycle. And it starts here with truth. In the Liber Cycle, we are searching for truth, to find something that's true, not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, the ability to read, but so that we can then apply it. And then once we try to apply it, we see that there are challenges to our character, roadblocks that come into our way, tests and trials that we face because we're trying to apply something that's true or something that's new into our life. If we're able to overcome those, then transformation happens, and we're able to then live this truth and incorporate it into our lives and into our character. And this is the Liber cycle that we want to continue to then, once we are living this truth, then we're able to receive and learn other truths in many different sources, not just from books, but also from experiences. But we're looking for it, and that's the culture that we want to have in our family, where we're increasingly becoming a part of this Liber cycle and learning more and applying more and becoming better people because of it. One of the ways to establish this Liber culture in our families is to read the classics. Oliver DeMille, in his book Thomas Jefferson Education, talks about 6 benefits of the classics. The first is that they teach human nature. The second is they bring us face to face with greatness. They take us to the frontier, they force us to think, and they connect us to the stories, not just in our mind, but in our heart. And then our canon, those things that we read, become the plot of our lives. in the story I was talking about with Song Lee and her family, she does learn how to read. And not just the mechanics of reading, but she actually learns to read stories and to understand literature and to start seeing how those characters become a part of her life. And she sees her life start to transform, like we talk about in the Liber cycle. Another of my favorite educators, Sarah Mackenzie, she writes about how reading with our family helps our children to not only love reading and find joy, but the very reading together helps us strengthen our family. And I've seen that so many times in my own family. Reading together gives us a shared language and a culture. It's really comforting. It's enjoyable. It helps us to understand other people, and it strengthens our values. When I think back on many of the books that we've read together as a family, my heart is warmed in those memories. So I brought a few of them. Where the Red Fern Grows, one of my favorite books, reading aloud with my children, heart-wrenching and tear-jerking. Also, Go Dog Go. This one is one of those that's actually has become one of our family cultures. There's a part in here where the one dog says, "Do you like my hat? I don't like your hat. Do you like my hat now?" Goofy little things, but it's a part of our family culture and our language now. Oh, Little Britches, one of my favorites. I love the principles that we learn, the values, the ways that this father teaches his son. When I read this book with my children, it helps my children to be inspired and to learn principles that I don't have to be preaching to them myself, but the father in the story can do it. I love that about books and reading books with my family. And then there's times when there's a book that just really resonates with you. And I have several adult children, and we read this book as a family and did a Skype discussion about it a few months ago. And it's now become a part of our language. We talk about being in the box or feeling better than, or those kinds of things, because this book became so much a part of us. It's increased our Liber culture by reading these books together. So how do we create and improve upon the Liber culture in our family? The first is that we have books everywhere. Elizabeth Wilson said, "To be at home with books, children need book-loving homes." I think that's so true. I like to have books in almost every room in our home and in all different locations, sitting on the coffee table or in different bookshelves or on the desk. We also like to have a Reading Now shelf. This is our Reading Now shelf, which is where the books that we're reading now go. And so it's usually a little more disorganized. It doesn't go with the fiction or the nonfiction. It's just the books that we're currently reading. Maybe some education books that I'm reading will be plopped here. You can see the Read Aloud Family, some other books I'm reading. Also, our family book that we're currently reading is usually on this shelf. And then each member of the family usually has at least one book that is on this shelf, so it's easy for them to get to, and when they're just sitting on the couch reading, then they can put it back on here and know where it is so it doesn't get lost. And it just reminds me, a lot of times I'll put a couple books on this shelf of books I want to read. Like this is a book that somebody that I bought from someone. I really want to read it, and so I put it here to remind myself to read it. I also have a big stack of books next to my bed on my bookshelf in my bedroom that is books that I want to read too. So having books and a book-loving home is really important. The second is to read. Super obvious, but really important. Read individually and make sure that your children see you reading too, and not just when they're asleep, if you have little ones. And reading could be listening to audiobooks, but it could also be reading actual books. But it's important for us to be reading individually and for our children to be reading individually, and then also to read together. So the third one is to cherish books and to cherish these truths that we are seeking in this Liber cycle. So in cherishing books, I have a friend who, when her kids are babies, when their children are babies, she puts board books into their crib so that from a really young age, they gain a love for books and for words, and then she talks to them about that. I like to give gifts. I like to give books as gifts and write in them. Usually for birthday or Christmas or some holiday, I will give gifts and that kind of shows that I do cherish them and it's important. Also, take time to find books that your children will enjoy and connect with. Look at lists. There are so many lists out there. Lists of books for different ages, books for boys, books for girls, books that teach this, books that teach that. Talk to your friends. Talk to people that you admire. Take the time to find books that your children will cherish. Then the fourth is to talk about books and ideas and learning. This is a huge, huge part of your family's culture. In the many years that I've been teaching youth throughout our schools in different communities where I've lived, I have, and these youth have gone through these amazing projects and been mentored by great mentors. But typically when I see a difference between a 14 or 15-year-old child who has really internalized and taken stewardship of their own education, and you can really see that they love learning and they're engaged in this Liber cycle in really seeking truth and to apply it in their lives, it's those whose homes are strong Liber culture, where they talk about it, where it doesn't just happen in a classroom in a once a week or several times a week situation, but it's happening all the time in their homes, and that's what we want to have in our homes. So earlier in our Family Foundations, Kathy gave an excellent video about colloquium in your family. That is a great thing to do, and to do an actual formal colloquium, a discussion on a book that you're reading while you're reading the book and at the end of the book. Another thing we do in our family a lot is talk about current events. Even when it might seem like the current events are over some of the kids' heads, that's okay. It's just a part of our discussion, and it will increase the vocabulary and increase their understanding. They're encouraged to ask questions, and usually they do, and so we get to practice our skills of putting difficult information into easy to understand language. It's so powerful, and it becomes a part of our shared culture. Learn from the experiences and talk about those experiences. We had a great mom's class, our Family Foundations mom's class last week in my Commonwealth school, and there was a guest speaker and she talked about different learning modalities. And then when the class was over and later that evening with my family, I was so excited to share with them what I had learned and to see what kind of different ways they learned and ways they expressed and processed their information. It was fascinating. I love having those kinds of discussions with our family. Another thing that's important is think about forms and how you can bring forms into the conversation. Not just talk about what's going on with the current events, but what's the principle behind that? How can we apply this to other situations? Same thing in the books that we're reading is talk about those characters. What would you do if you had been in that situation? The fifth one is to limit the electronic entertainment that is accessible for your family. Yourself as well, and we're going to be talking about that more in next month's focus, but I do want to mention it here because it's such an important part of developing and strengthening your Liber culture. Electronics can be so distracting and they have a really strong pull. I think of it like offering a toddler candy. I have a toddler and candy is a little bit makes him crazy. He loves it and there's not any other food he'd rather have than candy. But if I said to him, would you like to have broccoli or this yummy candy? He's not going to choose the broccoli. So there's most of the time we have to put the candy away so that he's going to learn to like the other things. And so I feel like it's the same thing with the electronics. So one of the things we've done to help that with our family is to not have the TV out in a prominent place in our main family room area. And you do what works for your family, but find ways that you can limit that and how you want to limit that. Number 6 is to work together on projects. It doesn't seem like it might really be part of a Liber culture, but it is. So many things you can do together to work with your family. And it doesn't just mean yard work or cleaning out the garage, though those are great examples. You could also build a tree house. We did that last fall with our family. Really fun. Plant a garden. Help a neighbor. Put on a play. Maybe help somebody. One of the family members is working on a project. Maybe they're doing a lot of videos and they need some help. See what it is when you work together as a family. Anytime you do something as a family, it builds your family culture. And so you do things that are moving people's mission forward. That is building your Liber culture. And the final thing, number 7, is to celebrate the process. Celebrate that whole Liber cycle, and that includes the ones on the bottom where you're getting those roadblocks. Sometimes we need to identify those and celebrate when we have triumphs over those, and even be able to celebrate when it looks like we've totally failed, and to see that that failure is a part of the process. I want to share one last part about Song Lee from The Rent Collector. Toward the end of the book, after she has learned to read and is reading literature, she's on a bus to find some help for her son. And it's a really, really long bus journey. And I think it was several hours. And the people on the bus are getting restless and upset with each other, irritated, and there's tension, and it's just taking so long. And Song Lee has a book with her, and she's reading this story, and she starts to read it out loud to her little boy to help him. And in that process, you see the eyes and the body language of the other people in the bus. They turn towards Song Lee, and they are now paying attention to this story. This story has captivated them, and they're able to endure their trials because of these stories. They get a little glimpse of the power of great literature and how it can help us in our lives. They get a little glimpse of this Liber cycle. So I want to share with you a quote from Song Lee's teacher, the Rent Collector. She says, she teaches Song Lee, stories teach us to not give up hope, because there are times in our own journey when we mustn't give up hope. Song Lee, we are literature. Our lives, our hopes, our desires, our despairs, our passions, our strengths, our weaknesses. Stories express our longing not only to make a difference today, but to see what is possible for tomorrow.